The airport was alive with the hum of departures, rolling suitcases, distant intercoms, and the faint scent of roasted coffee drifting through the terminal. It was a typical morning at Denver International, nothing out of the ordinary. Flight 482 to Washington, D.C. glowed on the departures board in blinking amber letters. The boarding gate buzzed with chatter, business travelers scrolling through emails, families juggling snacks and tickets, a teenager humming under his breath through earbuds. No one noticed her. Evelyn Parker stood near the window, quiet, observing. A slim woman in her early 30s, her black hoodie zipped up to her collarbone, a baseball cap pulled low. Her posture was relaxed but composed, the kind of calm that wasn't laziness, but awareness. She carried only one bag, small enough to fit under the seat. When the gate agent called boarding, she moved with the group, not rushing, not dawdling. Her eyes swept the area once, exits, security cameras, air marshals. She noticed the details most ignored, the rhythm of the gate agent's voice, the subtle limp in a mechanic outside the glass, the flicker of the runway lights as the morning fog thickened. Seat 14A, window seat, left side, just behind the wing. She slid into her place, pulling her hoodie closer, and placed her bag carefully under the seat. Outside, the silver fuselage reflected a dull sun, that strange, sleepy light that came before a storm. The man beside her, mid-40s, corporate type, gave her a polite nod. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Evelyn replied softly. He smiled, then went back to typing on his laptop. Evelyn's gaze flicked to his screen out of instinct. An open spreadsheet, Q4 reports. Harmless. She turned back to the window, where airport vehicles crawled like ants across the tarmac. The flight attendants moved briskly through the aisle, their smiles rehearsed but genuine enough. Evelyn watched every motion, every latch locked, every safety gesture made. She didn't look paranoid, only aware. Years of training made observation second nature. As passengers settled in, a little girl 2 rows ahead started laughing as her father tried to fold a paper plane. The sound made Evelyn smile faintly. She remembered when her own father used to take her flying in old crop dusters over dusty Colorado fields. Long before the Air Force, long before the missions, long before everything went wrong. The captain's voice came through the speakers. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Miles. We'll be heading out on time this morning, cruising at 35,000 feet. Clear weather over most of the route, about 3 hours to Washington, D.C. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." The engines began to hum, a familiar vibration that most passengers found comforting. Evelyn didn't relax. She listened. Every aircraft had a rhythm, a pattern of sound, vibration, and flow. Once you'd flown enough, especially in the military, you learned to hear when something was off. She leaned slightly forward, closed her eyes, and listened. Perfectly normal. As the plane taxied onto the runway, Evelyn caught her reflection in the window. Calm eyes, steady breathing, no trace of nerves. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who'd once worn a flight suit marked U.S. Air Force Special Communications Unit. That woman had died. At least, that's what the record said. The aircraft surged forward, engines roaring to life. The ground slipped away as the horizon tilted. Denver shrank beneath the clouds, swallowed by white. A baby cried somewhere in the back. The corporate man next to her loosened his tie and sighed in relief. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Routine, ordinary, safe. She wished she could believe it. At cruising altitude, the cabin settled into that quiet murmur unique to long flights. Pages turning, headphones whispering, coffee cups clinking. Flight attendants rolled carts down the aisles. Evelyn took a black coffee, nodded politely, and returned to the window. Below them stretched the vast emptiness of the Midwest, ribbons of rivers, grids of farmland, and highways fading into haze. To everyone else, it was just another flight. To Evelyn, it was a strange kind of prison. 200 strangers, 35,000 feet up, nowhere to run. She pulled a small silver watch from her wrist, unremarkable, digital, scratched. But its screen wasn't showing the time. It displayed a faint green pulse, a silent signal reader disguised as a normal smartwatch. A habit she couldn't drop even years after retirement. Old habits. Old ghosts. She told herself she was done with all of that. The operations, the encrypted channels, the classified frequencies only a handful of people on Earth could still decode. But some part of her never stopped listening. The quiet between frequencies was her comfort. The man beside her broke her thoughts. Heading home? He asked. Evelyn blinked, forcing a polite smile. Something like that. He chuckled. Same. DC's home base for me. I work with defense contracts, mostly data security. She felt the irony and suppressed it. Small world, she murmured. He laughed softly. Yeah, but a dangerous one lately. Her eyes drifted back to the window. Dangers didn't even begin to cover it. An hour passed. Everything remained ordinary. Until it wasn't. It started subtle. A faint shift in the hum of the engines. The slightest flicker in the cabin lights. Most passengers didn't notice. Evelyn did. Her body tensed. She looked up. One of the flight attendants near row 10 frowned, pressing her hand to the intercom earpiece. A second later, she moved quickly toward the cockpit. Evelyn's hand tightened on the armrest. The captain's voice came through the speakers, slightly distorted. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a bit of turbulence ahead. Please remain static. A pop. The plane jolted hard to the right. Several passengers gasped. Cups spilled. A baby cried again, this time in fear. Evelyn's mind sharpened instantly, scanning for sound, pressure change, mechanical cues. Then it happened again, a hard shake, followed by a metallic groan deep within the plane's body. That wasn't turbulence. That was instability. Her heart rate slowed, paradoxically calm. Training. She scanned the aisle. No smoke, no visible damage. No decompression yet. But something inside the cockpit had gone wrong. Electrical, maybe navigational. She could tell by the delay in the autopilot's correction. She unbuckled slightly, pretending to stretch. Her fingers brushed the side of the seat, feeling for the under panel where the oxygen system controls were located. Still intact. The corporate man beside her looked pale. What was that? Evelyn's tone was flat, steady. Could be a systems hiccup. Stay calm. He nodded nervously, gripping the seat. But inside, Evelyn wasn't calm at all. Her mind began mapping every possibility. Engine fault, power surge, loss of comms. None of it explained the signal interference she had felt seconds before the shake, a short pulse that hit her smartwatch, then vanished. Her instincts whispered what her rational mind refused to accept. Someone is inside the system. She glanced at the overhead panels, the cabin speakers, the oxygen mask housings. Everything looked fine, but her gut said otherwise. She'd seen it before, once years ago, during a classified mission when a drone's navigation was hijacked remotely by an unknown source. A pattern felt the same. For the first time in years, she felt that cold edge of adrenaline, not fear, but awareness sharpened to a blade. The captain's voice came through again, trembling now. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Then the intercom cut out completely. The engines growled unevenly. The cabin lights dimmed. Somewhere in the back, a passenger screamed. Evelyn looked toward the cockpit door, sealed tight, but she could almost sense the chaos behind it. Her heart thudded once, deep and heavy. Whatever was happening, it wasn't random. And if she was right, this wasn't just turbulence. It was the beginning. The cabin lights flickered again, a soft strobe of confusion washing over frightened faces. The air grew heavy with murmurs, whispers, and restrained panic. From seat 14A, Evelyn Parker watched it all with unnerving stillness. Her mind, trained for chaos, began dissecting every variable: altitude, engine tone, cabin pressure, airflow. Nothing matched turbulence. This was electronic interference, deliberate and precise. The intercom clicked. Static swallowed the pilot's voice mid-sentence. Then silence. A baby wailed in the back. The man beside her cursed under his breath, gripping the seat. A flight attendant stumbled past, her hands trembling as she pressed her earpiece. "Captain?" She whispered into it. "Captain, can you hear me?" No reply. Evelyn's jaw tightened. That wasn't a malfunction. That was a cut signal. She leaned forward slightly, pretending to adjust her shoes, and tapped her smartwatch twice. The small device blinked faint green, scanning nearby frequencies. Static. Then, briefly, a coded pulse. 3 short bursts, too long. It disappeared before the system could trace it. A chill rolled down her spine. That pattern. She'd seen it before. No, it couldn't be. The flight attendants tried to maintain calm, forcing smiles they didn't feel. "Everything's fine, folks. Just some signal interference with air traffic control." But Evelyn knew better. She caught sight of one attendant whispering frantically with another. Both pale, both shaking. Suddenly, the cabin lights dimmed again, darker this time. The plane lurched sideways. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like falling ghosts, swinging in eerie silence. Screams erupted. Evelyn's hand shot to her seatbelt. "Brace yourself," she told the man beside her, voice sharp and calm. He obeyed instantly. The plane dropped, once, twice, then stabilized with a violent jolt. Drinks flew from trays, coffee splashing onto the ceiling. A suitcase fell from an overhead bin, barely missing a child's head. The sound of chaos filled the cabin. Crying, gasping, prayers whispered through shaking lips. Evelyn stayed unnaturally still. Her pulse was steady, but her thoughts raced. The engines were operational. She could hear them, steady but under throttled control. But the plane wasn't responding to manual stabilizers. That meant only one thing. The autopilot had been hijacked. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Miles slammed his fists against the control panel. Warning lights blared red. His co-pilot, Evan Ruiz, fought to override the system, sweat pouring down his temple. "Navigation's gone? Total jam." Ruiz shouted. Miles grabbed the emergency frequency mic. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Flight 482. We're experiencing static." Then, nothing. The mic went dead. He tried the transponder. No response. Every channel was blocked. Miles' chest tightened. Who the hell? Then, on one of the side monitors, a faint message flickered in crimson letters. Access override engaged. It was impossible. Commercial planes didn't just get hacked. Not like this. Not mid-air. He turned to his co-pilot. "We've lost control of the flight path." Ruiz stared back in horror. "Then who's flying us?" Back in the cabin, Evelyn unbuckled. The corporate man tried to stop her. "What are you doing?" "Staying alive," she said simply. She crouched low, scanning under the seat, checking emergency wiring, observing the power flickers through the floor panels. The electrical signal was cycling. Something external was influencing the internal bus. That's when she noticed something else. A faint red light blinking near the rear of the cabin, close to the auxiliary power unit compartment. Her instincts screamed unauthorized modification. Without hesitating, she moved toward it. Passengers stared as she slipped down the aisle, calm mid-hysteria. A flight attendant blocked her path. "Ma'am, please sit." Evelyn's tone was sharp. "Do you have cockpit contact?" The attendant's mouth opened, then closed. She shook her head helplessly. "Then you'll want to let me through." There was something in Evelyn's voice, a tone of authority that made the woman step aside instinctively. Evelyn crouched near the compartment, pulled open a side panel, and looked inside. A small device, black, unmarked, no bigger than a phone, was attached to the power relay. Her stomach sank. A signal jammer. The engines howled as if alive, and the plane dipped again. Evelyn held on to the seat frame, eyes fixed on the device. She knew what it meant, a coordinated cyber hijack. Someone had taken control remotely. But how had the jammer gotten on board? Her brain moved at lightning speed. She scanned the nearest passengers. A man pretending to sleep, a woman clutching her phone tightly, even as others screamed, an unclaimed duffel bag under seat 16C. Her jaw clenched. It could be any of them, or none. The plane rattled violently. She turned toward the cockpit, determination replacing fear. If they're still alive, they'll need help. Evelyn moved fast. Every step forward felt like pushing through wind. Her hair whipped in her face. A child cried as she passed. She squeezed the little girl's shoulder softly. "You're safe. Stay with your mom." The mother nodded through tears. Evelyn didn't wait to explain. At row 7, the first officer's voice finally came through the speakers, cracked, terrified. "Brace for impact." Brace. Static. Then silence again. No voice, no control. No response. Only the rhythmic whine of engines losing balance. In that silence, Evelyn's heart sank deeper. She looked at the faces around her, strangers unaware of how close they were to dying. She remembered other missions, other silences, the ones before explosions. She had promised herself she'd never step back into this world, the one filled with codes, danger, and impossible choices. But now, 200 lives hung on her decision. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her watch. A faint code shimmered across the small green screen. R6 signal detected her call sign. Raven 6. Her past had found her. She inhaled sharply, whispered almost to herself, "You've got to be kidding me." Then, she pressed the emergency frequency override, a feature that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Come on," she muttered. Her watch buzzed once, and again. Connection established. The code frequency linked, not to the plane, but to a network buried deep within the military emergency systems she'd once helped design. It was still alive, forgotten, obsolete, but still functional. Evelyn spoke in a low voice. "This is Raven 6. Flight 482 compromised." Transponder jammed. Pilots unresponsive. No answer. She repeated it, louder. "Raven 6 to Command Net. Aircraft compromised." Her watch flickered again. Then a response, faint, garbled, but real. "Raven 6. Confirm identity." Her eyes widened. Someone was listening. Somewhere, miles away, deep under NORD's cold command bunker, someone had heard her. But before she could reply, the signal snapped. The jammer spiked, shutting down her line. She slammed her hand against the armrest in frustration. The plane dipped hard, throwing passengers against their seatbelts. Luggage crashed. A glass shattered. The screams returned, louder, desperate, echoing through metal and air. The man beside her clutched his chest, gasping. "We're gonna die." Evelyn turned to him sharply. "Not yet." Her eyes glowed with something fierce. Not hope, not courage. Focus. She had one mission now. Get into that cockpit. Regain control. And find out who or what was hijacking them. Because one thing was certain. If Flight 482 entered restricted airspace, the Air Force would have no choice but to shoot them down. And she was the only one aboard who knew how to stop it. The aircraft rocked again, metal groaning under stress. The cabin air was thick, hot, dry, filled with a raw scent of fear. People clutched their seats, praying under their breath. Evelyn Parker stood in the aisle, her hoodie half torn, her watch flickering faint green from overuse. She was no longer invisible. Every terrified eye seemed fixed on her, the woman who wasn't panicking. To them, she was strange. To her, they were fragile lives depending on seconds. "Ma'am, please sit down," a flight attendant cried, her voice breaking. Evelyn turned, calm but commanding. "If I sit down, you'll never land this plane." The attendant froze, uncertainty flickering across her face. Something in Evelyn's tone, that quiet, absolute certainty, told her to listen. She stepped aside, whispering to another crew member, "Let her through." Evelyn moved forward, her steps steady despite the trembling floor. She reached the locked cockpit door and banged once. "Captain, it's a systems jam. Do you copy?" No answer. She pressed her ear against the metal, hearing faint movement, maybe groans. One of them was still alive, but she couldn't break through. Not yet. Her mind flashed back to the one place she swore she'd buried forever. Afghanistan, 2017. Sandstorms howled through a broken desert outpost. Inside a half-collapsed communication bunker, Lieutenant Evelyn Hart, call-sign Raven 6, worked frantically over flickering monitors. Her fingers flew across keyboards, rerouting signals while mortar rounds exploded nearby. Her headset buzzed. "Raven 6, we're blind here. Can you get us satellite comes back?" "Working on it," she replied through the static, calm despite the chaos. "You've got 30 seconds before we're deaf to command." Sweat dripped from her temple, the air thick with smoke. She'd been trained for war, but this, a cyber attack in real time, was new. Then suddenly, she found the interference code. It was encrypted in a pattern she'd never seen, elegant, surgical. She countered with a frequency reversal that rerouted control to the Air Force's network. When the signal cleared, her commander's voice came through, breathless. "We've got visual again, Raven 6. How the hell did you—" Boom! The bunker shook. The lights died. Her last memory was fire, glass, and the sound of a friend's scream cut short. When she woke days later in a field hospital, the mission had been erased. Officially, it never happened. Her entire unit had been wiped from records. The government offered her a quiet discharge, honorable, sealed, unspoken. Evelyn took it. She changed her name, walked away. But the code she'd seen that day, the one that hijacked her outpost, was the same pattern her smartwatch just detected aboard Flight 482. Back in the cabin, Evelyn steadied herself against the wall, her pulse pounding. Her mind spun through possibilities. If this was the same group, or someone using their stolen tech, it wasn't random. They had targeted this flight for a reason. She looked around. 200 passengers. Ordinary people. Except maybe one. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned faces. The sleeping man at 16C still hadn't moved. Too calm. His hands were tucked under a blanket despite the heat. His bag was under the seat, unzipped. Evelyn approached slowly. "Sir?" she said, voice neutral. No response. She reached down, pretending to steady herself, and nudged the bag with her foot. The man's eyes opened immediately, sharp, alert. Evelyn froze, meeting his gaze. "Problem?" he asked. His tone was calm. Too calm. Her instincts screamed. "Not yet," she replied, stepping back. He smiled faintly, a predator's smirk. She returned to her seat, heart pounding. Whoever he was, he knew something. Maybe even planted the jammer. But confronting him here would risk panic. She needed the cockpit and access to the plane's communications grid. Her watch buzzed again. A faint flicker of green text appeared. Signal trace source unknown, then a message. Raven 6, confirm status. Someone out there, someone in the system, was still trying to reach her. She whispered under her breath, "This is Raven 6. Flight 482 compromised. Possible infiltration on board. Attempting cockpit access." Her watch vibrated twice. Confirmation received. At least she wasn't alone. Up front, Captain Miles was fading fast. The cockpit was dark, controls flickering in red emergency lights. His co-pilot groaned, blood seeping from a cut above his eyebrow. The autopilot refused manual override. It was as if an invisible hand was flying the plane. "Can't disconnect it," Ruiz said weakly. "The system fights back every time I try." Miles slammed his fist, then shut down the power. "I can't. It'll kill the hydraulics. We'll drop like a rock." Miles pressed his headset again. "ATC, this is..." He stopped. Static. Again. Always static. He stared at the monitor, at the same flickering red letters. "Access override, external." "God help us," he whispered. Back in the cabin, Evelyn turned to the crew. "You have a maintenance keypad near the galley, right?" The chief flight attendant nodded shakily. "Yes, but it's restricted. Not anymore." "I need it." She didn't explain further. She ducked into the galley, opened the narrow access panel, and found the keypad, small, gray, hidden behind a tray compartment. She typed a code she hadn't used in years. SPC-486 Alpha. The screen blinked. "Access denied." She cursed under her breath. Then she remembered something. The Air Force training mantra. When the code fails, improvise the signal. She pressed two buttons simultaneously, rerouting the panel to analog diagnostic mode. It worked. Faint electrical readings scrolled across the small display. Her eyes darted over the numbers. They're line 0317, a foreign signal frequency embedded in the plane's power routing. Someone was remotely controlling them, possibly from ground level, maybe from another aircraft. Evelyn leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Whoever you are," she whispered, "you made one mistake." She glanced at her watch. "You forgot who built this system." She pulled a small screwdriver from her bag, a compact tool disguised as a pen. With swift, precise movements, she removed the panel and accessed the wire junction underneath. Her fingers moved fast, stripping the insulation and creating a temporary bypass. Sparks flew. "Ma'am," a flight attendant gasped. Evelyn didn't flinch. "If I don't reroute this, we all die." Within seconds, she had the jammer's influence reduced by half. Her watch buzzed again, connection restored. She pressed it close to her lips. "Raven 6 to command net. Confirm uplink." The reply came this time, faint but unmistakable. "Raven 6, this is NORD. We copy you." Her breath caught. NORD. The network was still alive. "We've received an unauthorized distress ping from your aircraft," the voice said. "Who are you?" "Evelyn Parker, former USAF Special Communications. This flight's been hijacked electronically. I'm partially restoring control." Static. Then Raven 6. "That call sign's decommissioned." "Then revive it," she snapped. "Because I'm your only chance of getting this plane down in one piece." For a moment, There was silence. Then a voice deeper, firmer, took over the channel, clearly a superior officer. Raven 6, this is General Reese. We're tracking you. 22s are on standby. Don't shoot us down, she said sharply. I can still take manual control. I just need time. You've got 20 minutes before you enter restricted airspace, Reese warned. Then tell your Raptors to stay close. I'll need them to steady us if hydraulics fail. You'll never pull that off. Watch me. She ended the transmission, reattached the panel, and exhaled deeply. Sweat streaked her temples. Passengers stared, no longer just afraid, but in awe. Who are you? Someone whispered. Evelyn straightened her jacket, looked toward the cockpit, and said softly, someone who should have stayed forgotten. But the truth was out. The woman in seat 14A wasn't just another traveler. She was Raven 6, a ghost reborn, a soldier forced back into the war she never finished. And as Flight 482 streaked toward the East Coast skies, she knew one thing for certain. This hijack wasn't random. It was personal. The cockpit reeked of ozone and burning plastic. Captain Miles struggled to keep his eyes open as smoke coiled around the overhead switches. The instrument panel blinked like a dying heart monitor. Red, then black, then red again. Electricals shot. He shouted, "We're losing the second bus." His co-pilot, Ruiz, pale and bleeding, tried to stabilize the altimeter. "We're descending too fast. 3,000 feet per minute and climbing." The alarm screamed, overspeed, stall, autopilot fail, all at once. It was chaos in pure sound. Miles grabbed the radio, voice cracking. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is American 482. Total systems malfunction. Requesting immediate emergency assistance." Coordinates, then the line died. Just dead air. He tried again, shouting over the blaring klaxons. "Mayday, do you copy anyone? We are declaring an emergency." Nothing. Only the hum of static and the faint whisper of a voice he didn't recognize. Raven 6, uplink confirmed. Maintain altitude. F-22s inbound. Miles froze. Who the hell is Raven 6? Back in the cabin, Evelyn's watch glowed faint green as she monitored the restored connection. She could hear the pilot's broadcast failing. She could feel the panic spreading forward through the plane like electricity. The passengers were crying now. Some were praying. A child clutched her mother's arm, whispering, "Mommy, are we falling?" Evelyn knelt beside the aisle, speaking softly. "We're not falling. The plane's fighting back, and so am I." The words calmed the girl, if only slightly. Evelyn stood and made her way forward again. The flight attendants tried to stop her, but she moved with the confidence of someone who had walked into fire before. At the cockpit door, she knocked twice, firm, clear, unmistakable. "It's Evelyn Parker." "I can help you," she said. A moment of silence. Then a click. The door opened just enough for her to slide through. Inside, the cockpit was chaos. The co-pilot was half-conscious, his headset dangling. Captain Miles looked up, sweat dripping down his face. "Who are you?" He barked. "Someone who knows what's happening," Evelyn said calmly. "Your plane's being controlled remotely. There's a backdoor frequency embedded in your avionics network. I've isolated most of it." He stared. You what?" "Long story. But right now, we can't waste time." She slid into the jump seat, pulling a cable from her smartwatch. "I need access to your comport." "This isn't a movie, lady." Miles snapped. Evelyn met his glare. Neither was Afghanistan. Something in her tone made him stop. Without another word, he leaned aside and pointed. There, under the secondary panel. She connected her watch, the tiny screen lighting up with lines of green text. The plane's data began scrolling across it like a heartbeat. Signal source. Active origin. Unknown. Ground relay. Intercept priority. High. Got you, she whispered. Outside the cockpit, passengers could feel the shift. The violent shaking steadied, not gone, but less brutal. Hope flickered in terrified eyes. One of the attendants whispered, "She's doing something." "The woman from 14A. Another murmured, "Who is she?" No one knew. But everyone watched that locked door as if salvation itself stood behind it. "Captain," Evelyn said sharply, "I'm rerouting manual control through your secondary hydraulic bypass. The autopilot's locked, but if we sever the signal node, you can regain throttle control manually." Miles nodded, focused now. "Do it," she typed rapidly, her fingers flying across the small screen. The cabin lights flickered, then stabilized. One of the warning sirens shut off. Ruiz stirred, groaning. What's happening?" Evelyn gave a faint smile. "You've got your plane back. For now." Miles stared at her, disbelief and gratitude colliding in his eyes. "Who are you, really?" "Someone who is supposed to stay invisible," she said. But apparently, fate doesn't care about retirement. Meanwhile, far below, deep in the Colorado NORAD command center, General Reese stood before a massive radar screen. Blips tracked the path of American 482, erratic, dipping in altitude, then leveling again. An operator turned. "Sir, we've got the distress confirmed." Civilian aircraft, no response to control towers. But that internal ping, it's authentic. Reese narrowed his eyes. "The call sign?" "Raven 6. He froze. "That's not possible. She was declared Kia years ago." The operator swallowed. "Sir, she's alive. And she's on that plane." Reese turned to his comm officer. "Get me the Raptors airborne. Now." Full escort authorization. Within seconds, 2 F-22 Raptors roared off the runway, slicing into the darkening sky like blades of light. Back in the cockpit, Evelyn could feel the shift in the air pressure. They were dropping altitude, intentionally this time. Miles was testing manual control, cautiously easing the nose up and down. It was working. For now. But Evelyn wasn't celebrating. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. The foreign signal hadn't vanished completely. It was adapting. Moving. Then the message flashed. Secondary node activated cabin level. Her stomach dropped. "It's not over," she whispered. Miles frowned. "What now?" "There's another device on board. Probably planted before takeoff. Someone's controlling it manually. Someone on this plane?" Evelyn's voice was low, tight. "Seat 16C." She unbuckled and stood. Miles grabbed her arm. "If you're wrong, I'm not." Without waiting for permission, she stepped out and closed the door behind her. The cabin was chaos again, murmurs, frightened eyes following her every move. She walked slowly down the aisle, eyes locked on the man in 16C. He was awake now, watching her. "Enjoying the turbulence?" he said lightly. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "You're not a tourist." He tilted his head. "Neither are you, Raven." The sound of that name on his lips hit her like a punch. He knew. Passengers glanced between them, confused, frightened. Evelyn's heartbeat thundered. "Who sent you?" she demanded. He smiled. "Same people who erased you. Difference is, I stayed loyal." He reached under his seat, quick, deliberate. Evelyn lunged forward, slamming her hand against his wrist. A small device tumbled out, sleek, black, blinking red. Gasps rippled through the cabin. "Don't move," she ordered. "Everyone stay calm." The man smirked, whispering, You think you can stop it? She grabbed the device, flipping it open. Inside, not a bomb, but a signal relay module. The same code pulsed across the screen as before. She tore the wires free, sparks bursting in her hand. The red light died. The man laughed bitterly. Too late. You can't jam what's already launched. Evelyn's blood ran cold. What did you say? He leaned close, eyes dark. You'll see soon enough. Look outside. Evelyn turned, and through the right side window, she saw 2 F-22 Raptors soaring beside them, glimmering silver under the fading sun. One of the passengers cried, "They're here to save us." Evelyn's heart dropped. The F-22s weren't in formation. They were positioning, preparing for intercept. The man in 16C whispered, "NORAD thinks you're hijacked. You just gave them a reason to pull the trigger." She looked out again and saw the vapor trails tightening behind the jets. Her mind raced. The module had transmitted one last signal, a spoofed code marking their aircraft as hostile. And now, 35,000 feet above the Atlantic, 2 armed Raptors were closing in, ready to shoot them down. Evelyn clutched her watch and whispered into the com. "NORAD, this is Raven 6. Abort the intercept. The threat's internal, not external." Static answered. Then a voice, cold, uncertain. "Raven 6, your authorization code is invalid. Confirm you are not compromised." "Damn it," she hissed. "They think I'm the hijacker." Passengers were screaming now. The cabin lights flickered. The F-22s loomed closer, their wingtips flashing warning lights. Evelyn's heart pounded as she whispered to herself, "You buried me once, but not this time." She turned back toward the cockpit, shouting, "Captain!" "Bank left now." Miles' voice boomed from inside. "What?" "Why? Do it. Or they'll shoot." The engines roared as the plane tilted sharply, diving into a hard left turn. Drinks flew, passengers screamed, but the F-22s hesitated. The missile lock broke. For now. Evelyn grabbed an oxygen mask, her breath ragged. She stared at the dark sky outside, the fighters circling like wolves. "Come on, Reese," she muttered. "You trained me better than this." Read between the damn lines. Somewhere deep in NORAD, General Reese watched the same radar feed, jaw clenched. The data was confusing, wrong. But one thing stood out, a faint transmission buried in the static. Not words. A code pattern, old, obsolete. One only one person ever used. His eyes widened. "That's Raven 6. He turned to his officer. "Hold your fire." Up in the skies, Evelyn's watch flickered once more. A new message appeared. Transmission verified, intercept aborted. Her knees nearly buckled in relief. For a brief, fragile moment, they were safe. But she knew this was only the beginning. Someone had planted that module for a reason, and someone had wanted her found. The ghosts she left behind weren't finished with her yet. The world inside Flight 482 was collapsing. The air smelled of smoke and ozone. Oxygen masks swung wildly as the plane trembled in a steep, unnatural descent. Passengers screamed prayers that dissolved into choking coughs. The overhead lights flickered like the heartbeat of a dying beast. In the middle of that chaos, Evelyn Parker lay slumped near the cockpit door, motionless, blood trickling from her temple. Her right hand still clutched the corner of the jammed control panel. She'd tried to override before the electrical surge threw her against the bulkhead. "Ma'am! Hey! Can you hear me?" shouted the young flight attendant, Lena, her voice trembling. She knelt beside Evelyn, shaking her gently. Evelyn's eyelids fluttered, a faint groan escaping her lips. Her vision blurred, the world spinning, muffled, fading in and out. She tried to speak, but the words got lost somewhere between her lungs and the burning in her throat. "Stay with me," Lena pleaded, pressing a napkin against the wound on Evelyn's forehead. "Please don't die. You're the only one who seems to know what's happening." That sentence, those words, forced Evelyn's mind to push through the haze. She blinked rapidly, memories flashing like lightning bolts. The jammer, the hijack signal, the transponder offline, and the F-22s now circling them. She tried to sit up. How long was I out?" "Minutes," Lena stammered. "The pilot's still unconscious. We're dropping fast." Evelyn turned her head toward the cockpit. Through the shattered door window, she saw the co-pilot's limp body slumped over the controls. The panel was a galaxy of red, every alarm screaming, lights blinking, systems locked. Her breathing quickened. "Come on, Evelyn. Focus." She pushed herself upright, blood smearing the floor where her hand slid. The pain in her ribs shot upward like fire, but she didn't have the luxury of weakness. "Help me get him up," she said, nodding toward the cockpit. Lena hesitated, but obeyed. Together they pulled the co-pilot back, struggling against the shaking of the aircraft. Evelyn leaned over the console, her fingers dancing across keys and switches, trying to read through the corrupted data. Autopilot locked, external signal override, her stomach clenched. It was worse than she feared. Someone had full remote control, feeding commands directly into the flight computer. She whispered under her breath, "They're flying us like a drone." Outside, the night sky wasn't silent anymore. Two F-22 Raptors streaked alongside Flight 482, engines glowing like twin comets. The pilots inside, call signs Reaper 1 and Valkyrie 2, stared at their radars, the blip of Flight 482 swerving unpredictably across restricted airspace. "Reaper 1 to command," crackled the radio. "Target aircraft still unresponsive. No transponder. No IFF code." A tense voice from NORAD came back. "Copy, Reaper 1. Maintain shadow formation. Rules of engagement standing by." Standing by, it was the coldest phrase in aviation. It meant one thing. If the civilian jet crossed into Washington airspace, the order to shoot it down would come without hesitation. Reaper 1's pilot, Captain Darren Holt, exhaled hard. God help whoever's on board that thing. Inside the cabin, Evelyn ripped open an emergency kit and found a manual access cable, a last resort way to bypass system firewalls. She connected it to her smartwatch, its cracked screen still flickering faintly. "Come on, Raven 6, she murmured to herself. "You built this system. You can break it." Lena stared, terrified yet mesmerized. "What are you doing?" "Talking to someone who might still be listening." She keyed in a sequence of numbers that no civilian should ever know. Frequency reserved for ghost communication. Channels deep within U.S. cyber defense networks. Then, in a low voice, she spoke into the mic. "Raven 6 to command net. Flight 482 hijacked by external source. Requesting tactical override authentication." For a moment, nothing. Then, through layers of static, a faint voice responded. "Raven 6. Confirm live identity code." Her pulse spiked. They remembered her. She tapped in her verification. A 16-digit code burned into her memory from a life she'd sworn to leave behind. Confirmed. "Raven 6, what's your status?" "Plane's been remotely hijacked. I have 2 pilots down. Civilian passengers on board. Jammer device attached to the power relay. Suspect cyber attack from offshore control node. I'm attempting manual regain." "Copy that, Raven 6. We have your location. Stand by for F-22 response. Do not attempt cockpit override until confirmation." "Too late for that," she muttered, eyes narrowing at the rapidly dropping altitude. We're at 32,000 and descending fast. I need to stop the bleed now, or we won't be talking much longer. In the command center at NORAD, alarms were flashing across screens. Analysts shouted coordinates, technicians rerouted frequencies, and an officer barked into his headset. Get those fighters on secure comms with the Raven channel. Tell them 14A is live. The general in charge, a gray-haired man named Briggs, slammed his fist on the console. Raven 6? I thought she was dead. She's not, said the communications officer. And she's sitting on that plane. Briggs stared at the screen. Flight 482's radar icon blinking red. Then God help us all if she can't pull it out of the sky? Back in the cockpit, Evelyn's fingers flew over the controls. Her smartwatch blinked, the small screen pulsing green as she forced manual commands into the system. Manual throttle to 50%, she whispered. Stabilize pitch at -2 degrees. Override execute. The plane shuddered violently, then steadied slightly. Passengers screamed as gravity shifted. Coffee cups rolled down aisles. She had managed to wrestle partial control back from the hijacker. Lena gasped. You did something. Not enough, Evelyn said. Sweat dripped from her forehead. Her voice dropped. They're still flying us, just slower. Outside, the F-22s noticed the change. Command, this is Reaper 1. Target aircraft appears to have regained partial stability. Possible pilot input detected. Copy, Reaper. Maintain formation. Do not engage until ordered. Suddenly, the screen in front of Evelyn flashed. A line of red text scrolled across, taunting, mocking. Hello, Raven 6. Long time. Her heart stopped. The hijacker knew her. This wasn't random. This was personal. Who are you? She hissed into the mic, knowing they could hear. Another message appeared. You built the door. I just walked through IT. Her blood ran cold. Someone had found her old security back door, a classified entry she'd created years ago when designing cyber defense systems for the government. She had buried it, deleted it, destroyed every trace. But someone had resurrected it, and now they were flying an entire plane with it. Evelyn, Lena whispered, terrified. What does that mean? Evelyn's voice was ice. It means I'm the reason this is happening. Outside, the clouds tore apart like curtains, revealing the dark shimmer of the Atlantic below. The nose of the aircraft tilted upward, engines roaring back to life, an unnatural correction that wasn't hers. The hijacker was fighting back. Every time Evelyn forced control one way, the system pushed back harder, like an invisible hand wrestling the yoke from her. Sparks burst from the panel. The entire cockpit glowed orange under the flickering emergency lights. Come on, she shouted, slamming her palm on the console. You want to play? Let's play. She bypassed her own security layers, feeding false data into the hijacker's signal stream, confusing their system. The plane jolted side to side, engines whining in protest. Passengers screamed as turbulence threw them against their restraints. Bags flew, panels cracked, alarms screamed. But gradually, inch by inch, the controls loosened. For a brief moment, she had control. Altitude steady at 25,000, she said through gritted teeth. Level hold engaged. Lena gasped. You did it. Evelyn didn't smile. Her eyes remained fixed on the blinking cursor at the top of the screen. Not bad, Raven 6, but you can't land what you can't see. Suddenly, the plane's navigation system went black. Every instrument shut off. Horizon, altitude, radar, GPS, all gone. Outside, clouds swallowed the jet whole, lightning streaking through the darkness. Evelyn stared into the void beyond the windshield, breath shallow, knuckles white on the controls. Somewhere behind her, a child cried softly. And for the first time, fear flickered across Evelyn Parker's face. Because she realized whoever was behind this wasn't trying to crash the plane. They were trying to make her land it blind. The world outside Flight 482 was a vortex of black clouds, streaks of lightning, and rain slicing across the fuselage like shards of glass. Inside, the cabin was chaos. Oxygen masks swinging, luggage rolling across the aisles, and the terrified passengers pressed into their seats. Evelyn Parker gripped the controls with white-knuckled intensity. Every muscle in her body screamed, but there was no room for weakness. She had control, mostly, but now the navigation and radar systems were completely offline. She had to fly blind. Altitude holding 25,000, she whispered to herself. Heading straight enough to survive. Lena, the young flight attendant, hovered near her side, wide-eyed. Evelyn, how are you even alive? I trained to survive worse, Evelyn muttered. Now we just need to land this plane. The hijacker's voice crackled faintly through the hidden module he had planted. You think you can cheat the system, Raven 6? Her stomach dropped. He was still monitoring her every move. I'm not cheating, she said under her breath. I'm outsmarting you. High above, the two F-22 Raptors streaked through the storm like phantoms, lights slicing through the darkness. NORAD had authorized visual guidance only, no missiles, but the situation was precarious. If Flight 482 made a sudden descent into restricted airspace, their orders were to neutralize the target immediately. Captain Darren Holt of Reaper 1 tightened his grip on the controls. She's doing it, he said over the com. I see input on the flight path. Raven 6 is alive and guiding them. Copy, Reaper. NORAD responded. Keep formation. Maintain visual. Do not engage. The jets danced around the storm, following every tilt and yaw of the struggling airliner. Inside the cabin, Evelyn had begun improvising. With radar and navigation offline, she relied on instincts honed over. Years of training, plus tiny visual cues. The angle of the horizon, lightning bursts illuminating the clouds, and faint moonlight reflecting off the wingtip. Passengers, listen, she shouted. We're in control. Stay calm and fasten your seatbelts. I need everyone seated now. Children whimpered. Mothers clutched them tightly, but slowly the cabin obeyed. She could feel Lena guiding them with whispered reassurances. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment and visualized the landing strip. Imaginary lines in her mind that mirrored the runway lights she hoped would appear. She remembered her first F-16 landing during training. The rhythm of descent, the perfect glide path, the adjustment of throttle and flaps. Her fingers danced over the controls. The plane shuddered violently, almost pitching forward. She adjusted. Slowly, inch by inch, the tilt evened. Then came the hijacker's next move. The hidden module sent a pulse to artificially override rudder input. The plane's nose jerked violently to the right, sending cups of water and belongings flying. Evelyn cursed. Not today, she growled. She slammed the counter-sequence into her smartwatch, jamming the module's signal long enough to regain rudder control. The storm outside intensified. Lightning cracked dangerously close, illuminating the terrified faces of passengers. Rain streaked the windows, turning visibility to near zero. God help us, Lena whispered. Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't pray. She had to act. She opened the cockpit window slightly, just enough to feel the wind and the plane's angle relative to the ground. A small old pilot trick she had learned in survival training. Visual reference through natural cues when instruments fail. The F-22 pilots adjusted their positions to flank the airliner, one on each side. Evelyn noticed them through occasional lightning flashes. They were the only eyes she could trust. Raven 6, confirmed visual on both Raptors. NORAD crackled. Confirmed, she replied, following their position. I'm on manual, heading toward nearest airfield. Systems are mostly dead, altitude descending at 2,000 feet per minute. Flaps intact. Fuel stable. Copy. Reaper 1, Valkyrie 2. Maintain escort and provide visual guidance. Then, as if the storm weren't enough, the hijacker escalated. Another jolt came, followed by the module flashing red on her watch. Secondary override activated, the device read. Her stomach tightened. This was no longer just interference. Someone on board was actively trying to force the plane into a crash trajectory. She realized the truth. The hijacker wanted to frame her, to make it look like she was the one taking the plane down. Evelyn turned toward the cabin. Seat 16C. He was watching, smug, confident that she had no choice but to follow his commands. She clenched her jaw. Not today, she whispered. She used a covert switch under her sleeve, a frequency jammer from her own stash, and disabled the secondary module. Sparks flew, and the man's face turned pale. Passengers didn't notice. They only felt the sudden stabilization. Miles, still conscious in the cockpit, looked at her with disbelief. You did what? Saved the plane, she said, for now. But the storm's still ahead. We need a landing, and we need it fast. The F-22 pilots communicated visually, flashing formation lights. Evelyn mimicked their angle, following their lead. Slowly, the plane adjusted to a steady glide path. But the hijacker wasn't done. He activated a small hydraulic lock inside the rudder controls. The plane jerked hard, sending some passengers tumbling from their seats. Evelyn didn't flinch. She remembered a lesson from training. If a system fights back, work around it. Using an auxiliary hydraulic bypass she rigged earlier with her smartwatch and the cockpit's auxiliary power, she countered the override. The plane leveled again, steady as it would get under such conditions. Time seemed to stretch. Every second was an eternity. Evelyn could hear the terrified whispers of passengers. She could feel the strain on the plane's metal frame. Lightning struck nearby, illuminating the F-22s as they flanked the jet-like guardians in silver armor. Raven 6 NORAD, the general's voice came again. We need that plane on the ground now. Visual guidance confirmed. You can do this. Evelyn's hands gripped the yoke. Sweat dripped down her face. She could see a faint glow on the horizon, the runway lights of the nearest airfield. The hijacker cursed under his breath, realizing his manipulations had been countered. He lunged toward the control panel, but Evelyn blocked him with her body. This ends now, she said firmly. He smirked, but his confidence wavered. The F-22s, now within visual range, mirrored her movements, adjusting and warning her of wind shifts and turbulence. The descent continued. 30,000 feet, 25. 20. Passengers gripped their armrests, gripping each other, silent in terror and awe. Evelyn felt every gust of wind, every drop, every shudder. Her mind worked in fractions of a second. Every correction, every adjustment mattered. Raven 6, NORAD crackled. You are cleared. Emergency landing authorized. The airfield is ready. F-22s will escort you in. She whispered under her breath. Thank you. The horizon grew clearer. Runway lights glittered like stars fallen to earth. With the hijacker now subdued in seat 16C, tied up with emergency straps, she focused fully. Evelyn adjusted the throttle, flaps, and rudder, inch by inch. The wheels grazed the wet tarmac. The plane shuddered violently on landing, but it held. Brakes screeched, tires smoked, and then stillness. The cabin erupted in cheers and tears. Passengers embraced strangers. Children clutched their parents. Lena wept openly, brushing blood and sweat from Evelyn's face. Evelyn slumped back, exhausted beyond measure, but alive. She had done the impossible, flown a hijacked, nearly disabled airliner through a storm, blind under the manipulation of a trained enemy, and survived. The F-22s peeled off, engines roaring into the night sky. An ORAD's voice came through, quieter now, filled with awe. "Raven 6, you just saved hundreds of lives. We didn't believe you were real." She exhaled, looking at the passengers, her eyes softening for the first time. "I am. And I never left." But she knew one thing. The man who set this up, who knew her secrets, wasn't finished. Somewhere, the real game was just beginning. The plane sat on the tarmac, engines still humming, rain pattering against the fuselage. Emergency lights flashed across the cabin. Passengers were shaken, but alive. Evelyn slumped into the jump seat, exhausted beyond reason. Her fingers trembled as she removed the small signal jammer she had rigged, checking the cockpit systems. They were mostly stable now, the hijacker subdued, the aircraft intact. She finally allowed herself to look at him. Seat 16C, the man who had tried to control the plane remotely. He was restrained with emergency straps, his smug grin replaced by a flicker of fear. "Who are you?" Evelyn demanded, voice still firm despite fatigue. He laughed, a low, sinister chuckle. "You really don't remember me, do you? The girl in 14A who disappeared. The one the government swore was dead?" Evelyn's stomach tightened. She did remember. But she had spent years burying that past. "I don't care about your identity," she said. "What do you want?" He leaned forward. "The same thing they always wanted. You back in the open. Your little Raven 6 secrets aren't buried anymore, sweetheart. And the world? They want you gone." Outside, NORAD's command center was buzzing. Radar tracked the plane, now stationary. But their attention wasn't on the airliner. It was on Evelyn. General Briggs paced back and forth. "She did it," he muttered to himself. Raven 6 actually did it. An officer called out, "Sir, confirmation on the hijacker?" Briggs turned sharply. "Tie him into interrogation, now, and patch in Evelyn for debrief." Back in the cabin, Evelyn faced the man in 16C. Every second he stayed calm, smug, made her pulse rise. "Name," she demanded. He smirked. "Cameron Vale. You trained me once, remember Kandahar?" Her eyes narrowed. Memories collided. The base. The field operation where a young recruit had shown extraordinary skill. Someone she had taken under her wing, teaching him protocols, encryption, emergency maneuvers. She had trusted him. And now, years later, he had tried to use her own training to destroy the plane. "You were supposed to be dead, like me," she said, disbelief in her voice. "No," he whispered. "I survived because of you. And I waited, watching, learning, and when the time came," he let his words hang like a knife above her heart. "I acted." Evelyn's mind raced. Cameron's knowledge of her past, the plane, the modules, it all pointed to one thing: inside help. Someone high up in the government must have authorized access to Flight 482 systems. Someone who still considered her a threat. She whispered under her breath, "They set me up." Cameron's lips curled. "Exactly. They wanted you in the open. They wanted you exposed. And I just delivered the invitation." The cabin fell silent, except for the hum of the engines and the soft cries of frightened passengers. Evelyn felt the weight of the moment. She had saved the plane, but the war wasn't over. Not even close. Meanwhile, NORAD's General Briggs reviewed intercepted communications. "This code," he muttered. "It's Raven 6's own. Someone used her old authentication protocols. But she's alive, transmitting live. Whoever did this has access to internal networks. They're high up, and they're dangerous. His second-in-command, Colonel Harper, leaned over. Sir, if they wanted her gone, the hijack could have been fatal. But they didn't pull the trigger. That means it was tactical. Briggs' face hardened. They're sending a message. And we need to find out who. Back on Flight 482, Evelyn turned to Cameron. Her gaze was icy. Why involve the civilians? She demanded. Why risk hundreds of lives? He shrugged, almost casually. Collateral damage is part of the game. You always knew that. I'm not playing your game anymore, she said. You've lost control. He laughed. Have I? I know the back doors you left, the vulnerabilities you swore would never be exploited. And I exploited every single one. The plane didn't crash because you're alive and clever. But it's proof you can be forced. Evelyn clenched her jaw. I'm not alone. They won't let you win. Cameron's eyes flickered. For the first time, a shadow of doubt crossed his face. But he masked it with a sneer. We'll see. Evelyn took a deep breath and leaned back. Her mind raced through contingencies. Contain Cameron, done. Secure the passengers, done. Analyze the signal. She needed to understand exactly what was compromised. Find the mastermind behind the setup. The true enemy was still hidden. She opened her smartwatch again, scanning the residual signals from the hijack. Traces led not to a foreign power, but deep inside government infrastructure. A high-level internal breach. Someone with clearance, someone who had never trusted her, someone who feared Raven 6's abilities. Her blood ran cold. They had been tracking her for years, watching her in secret, waiting for the perfect moment to test her limits. Outside, the storm had cleared slightly. Runway lights glittered like a lifeline. Cameron noticed, his confidence cracking. They think they can use the jets to force you down safely, he muttered. But what if you fail? One mistake? Evelyn's voice was cold as ice. I won't fail. Not now. Not ever. As the passengers disembarked, under the watchful eyes of emergency crews, Evelyn stayed behind a curtain, her mind still racing. She had saved hundreds of lives, but she had also uncovered a deeper threat. Cameron, taken into custody by military personnel, still smirked at her. This isn't over, he said. You can't hide forever. Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. Try me. She stepped outside, greeted by the cold air of a storm-cleared night, the hum of F-22s fading above. For the first time, she felt a small measure of relief, tempered by the knowledge that the true enemy was still out there. Back at NORAD, General Briggs reviewed the situation. The flight had been saved, the hijacker captured, and Raven 6 was alive. But the traces of internal sabotage remained. Someone high up wanted her tested, he muttered. And now, we know they can reach her anywhere. He tapped the comms. Bring Raven 6 in. We need a full debrief. And we need to find the people behind this before they strike again. Evelyn watched the plane she had saved. She had stared death in the face, outsmarted a former protege, and thwarted a hijack that could have killed hundreds. But she knew one truth above all: the storm wasn't over. And somewhere, the person who orchestrated this entire nightmare was already planning the next move. Her past had caught up to her, but Evelyn Parker Raven 6 was ready. She squared her shoulders, eyes sharp. Let's find them. The war wasn't just in the sky anymore. It was everywhere. The rain had finally stopped. The lights of the airfield glimmered against a wet runway. Helicopters buzzed in the distance. Cameras flashed. Military personnel moved briskly, but Evelyn Parker, Raven 6, moved like a shadow, quiet, controlled, calculating. Cameron Vale, the man who had tried to hijack Flight 482, was secured in a military transport vehicle. He had been defiant on the flight, but now, stripped of his advantage, he was nothing more than a cautionary tale. Evelyn didn't look at him. Her eyes were on the bigger picture, the internal network traces that had led her here. Someone powerful had orchestrated the hijack, someone with full access to government clearance, someone who had always feared her. She stepped into a secure military command tent, her boots clicking against the wet concrete. Inside, General Briggs, Colonel Harper, and a team of cyber analysts waited. "Raven 6, Briggs said, tension in his voice. "We have the evidence. It points to a high-level contractor within the Department of Defense. Someone who doesn't want you alive." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "And we find them. And we end this." The analysts displayed multiple screens of code, signal traces, and security logs. Evelyn's fingers moved faster than they could comprehend, tracing lines of attack, backdoors, and overrides. "Here," she said, pointing. "This is the command node. It's disguised as an internal maintenance channel, but it's routed through multiple proxy servers, domestic and offshore. Whoever did this wanted plausible deniability." Colonel Harper frowned. "That's some sophisticated work." Evelyn nodded. "Yes, and it wasn't just Cameron acting alone. He was a tool. The real mastermind is still protected, but I can expose them if we act quickly." Briggs' eyes hardened. "You have our resources. Anything you need." Meanwhile, Cameron Vale, in his transport, smirked despite his restraints. "You think you've won, Raven 6? He hissed. "You're just dancing in a cage they built for you." Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. Actions spoke louder than words. She returned to the command tent, where analysts were ready. Evelyn began her counter-operation. It was precise and surgical. Digital forensics to trace every packet, signal analysis to reverse engineer the hijack codes, and behavioral profiling to predict the mastermind's next move. Hours passed. The storm outside was gone, but the storm in Evelyn's mind raged. Every lead was a puzzle, every clue a potential trap. And then she found it. A single digital fingerprint remained, a unique authorization signature tied to Admiral Stanton, a senior official long rumored to distrust Raven 6 and her unconventional methods. Evelyn had crossed paths with Stanton during covert operations years ago, exposing critical security flaws he preferred to ignore. "Found him," she said, voice low but steely. Admiral Stanton orchestrated this entire thing. He manipulated Cameron, used internal channels to hijack the plane, and framed me to discredit Raven 6. Briggs' face went pale. "Stanton? He's untouchable. We don't have clearance to confront him directly." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't confront him. We expose him, publicly. Evidence, logs, intercepted signals, everything." Colonel Harper nodded slowly. "We'll need a controlled release. Any misstep and the fallout could be catastrophic." Evelyn leaned over the screens, her mind a whirlwind of strategy. "I can guarantee success, but I need full access. And I need Cameron to cooperate." Cameron had been moved to a secure debriefing room. Evelyn entered, the air between them charged with tension. "You're going to tell me everything," she said. He laughed weakly. "You don't even know the half of it." "You will," she said firmly. "Or I'll make sure Stanton's fingerprints are all over this, and you'll take the fall entirely." He hesitated. Then slowly he began talking. Details of the plan, the channels, the orders from Stanton, everything spilled out. He even admitted that Stanton had underestimated Raven 6, thinking she'd be too isolated to counteract. Evelyn listened silently, memorizing every word. By the time Cameron finished, she already had a plan. The next morning, the operation began. Using a combination of internal and external systems, Evelyn remotely accessed Stanton's secure communications. She planted counterlogs, reverse-traced his instructions, and captured irrefutable proof of his orchestration. At the same time, NORAD and military cyber analysts coordinated. The evidence compiled into a dossier that would leave Stanton with no room for denial. By midday, the operation was ready. Evelyn called a secure line to General Briggs. "I've got everything," she said. "He won't see this coming. Stanton thinks he controls the narrative, but I control the evidence." Briggs exhaled, a mixture of relief and awe. "You've outdone yourself, Raven 6. Evelyn's final step was the most daring. She arranged a live briefing with top government officials and media oversight. Cameron, now fully cooperating, was present as a witness. The screens behind her displayed the intercepted communications, the hijack logs, and the internal directives linking Stanton to every step of the plan. "You thought you could destroy me," Evelyn said, her voice firm, echoing in the room. "You thought hiding behind ranks and clearance would shield you. But I am Raven 6. I do not hide. And I do not fail." Stanton, seated in a secure video link, paled as he realized the full scope of what had been exposed. Every command, every manipulation, every attempt to control her was now public record. Evelyn continued, voice unwavering. Flight 482 was saved because of quick thinking, courage, and action. Hundreds of lives were protected, despite your attempts to manipulate them for political gain. Justice will prevail, and the truth cannot be silenced. The room erupted in controlled chaos. Officials whispered, assistants typed frantically, and Stanton's digital presence blinked out as the evidence was solidified. He was finished. Cameron, once arrogant and smug, looked at Evelyn with something like awe. "I underestimated you," he admitted. Evelyn's eyes softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "You learned the hard way. Never underestimate Raven 6 again." Weeks later, Flight 482's passengers gathered for a ceremony. Evelyn, standing quietly in the back, observed them. Families reunited, children laughed, and the survivors looked at her with gratitude they could not put into words. She didn't seek praise. She didn't need it. Saving lives was never about recognition. But for the first time in years, she allowed herself a small smile. NORAD and military officials had implemented new security protocols inspired by her actions. The breach Stanton had orchestrated would never be exploited again. And as for Cameron Vale, he was imprisoned, fully exposed, a warning to anyone who thought they could manipulate the system. Evelyn Parker, Raven 6, returned to her quiet life, her identity partially restored. She remained a ghost to most, but now a celebrated hero to those who understood the truth. She looked out at the horizon, where the sun rose over the airfield, casting golden light on the wet tarmac. Her mind was calm. The storm had passed, for now. But deep inside, she knew this. The world would always have threats, some visible, some hidden. And as long as there were storms to face, Raven 6 would be ready. The woman in seat 14A, overlooked, underestimated, had rewritten the rules. And anyone who doubted her again would learn exactly why no one could ignore Raven 6. The story was over, but the legend had just begun.